The year is 2025. The world watches as the United States and Russia meet in Saudi Arabia. The topic? Peace in Ukraine. A glaring omission hangs over these talks: Ukraine itself. The very nation at the heart of the conflict, ravaged by war, is absent from the negotiating table. This exclusion speaks volumes about the current state of international diplomacy and the disregard for Ukraine's sovereignty. President Volodymyr Zelensky has been resolute in his stance. No peace deal without Ukraine's direct involvement. His position is not merely a matter of principle, but a reflection of the reality that any agreement directly impacts Ukraine's future, its people, its territory. To dictate terms without Ukrainian participation is to perpetuate the very imperialism that fueled this conflict. The images emanating from Saudi Arabia are stark. US and Russian officials huddle, conferring in hushed tones. Meanwhile, Ukrainian cities face another day of bombardment, another day of families torn apart. The dissonance is jarring. It underscores the dangerous illusion that peace can be brokered over the heads of those most impacted by war. This exclusionary approach risks exacerbating existing tensions and fueling further mistrust. The US-Russia talks mark a significant development in the conflict. For the first time in 3 years, high-ranking officials from both nations are engaging in direct dialogue. Leading the U.S. delegation is Steve Witkoff, the current U.S. Middle East envoy, known for his recent 3-hour meeting with Vladimir Putin. Joining him are Secretary of State Marco Rubio and National Security Advisor Mike Waltz. These talks, initiated after a phone call between former President Trump and Putin, have sparked outrage and concern across Europe. European leaders, key stakeholders who have provided substantial financial and military aid to Ukraine, find themselves similarly excluded from these crucial discussions. French President Macron, in a display of European solidarity, has convened a separate meeting in Paris. This gathering brings together European leaders, NATO officials, and other key players to address the situation and assert Europe's central role in any viable peace process. The exclusion of Europe from these talks is a strategic misstep with potentially far-reaching consequences. It undermines the transatlantic alliance, which has been a cornerstone of European security for decades. Europe's absence from the negotiating table raises serious doubts about the legitimacy and effectiveness of any agreements reached. A lasting and just peace in Ukraine cannot be achieved without the full participation and support of all stakeholders, including, and most importantly, Ukraine itself. The Saudi Arabia talks have exposed a shift in U.S. policy toward the conflict in Ukraine. Recent statements from former President Trump, suggesting the impracticality of Ukraine joining NATO and the unlikelihood of returning to 2014 borders, have raised eyebrows and fueled anxieties. This rhetoric, coupled with the U.S. push for Europe to shoulder a larger share of Ukraine's defense costs, signals a potential waning of American commitment to Ukraine's long-term security. Adding fuel to the fire are the pronouncements of U.S. officials like former VP J.D. Vance, whose criticisms of European defense spending at the Munich Security Conference further strained transatlantic relations. Within the U.S. itself, a chasm has emerged, with some Democrats emphasizing the need for continued U.S.-Europe cooperation and holding Russia accountable for its actions. This internal discord within the U.S. political landscape further complicates the situation. The lack of a unified and coherent strategy weakens the West's position in any negotiations with Russia. The current U.S. administration must prioritize repairing the rifts within its own government and with its European allies to present a united front and effectively counter Russian aggression in Ukraine. As the world grapples with the ramifications of the U.S.-Russia talks, one thing remains abundantly clear. A just and lasting peace in Ukraine cannot be achieved without the full and equal participation of Ukraine itself. The current trajectory, characterized by backroom deals and the exclusion of key stakeholders, is not only counterproductive, but also deeply disrespectful to the Ukrainian people who have endured unimaginable suffering throughout this conflict. The international community must demand a more inclusive approach to peace negotiations, one that places Ukraine's needs and aspirations at the forefront. President Zelensky's call for a European army, while ambitious, underscores the urgent need for a robust and united European security architecture that can effectively deter further Russian aggression. The path to peace is fraught with challenges, but the fundamental principle remains non-negotiable. Ukraine has the right to determine its own future. The international community must stand in solidarity with Ukraine, not just with words but with concrete actions that support its sovereignty, independence, and territorial integrity. Only through a truly inclusive peace process, one that respects Ukraine's agency and addresses the root causes of this conflict, can we hope to build a more stable and secure future for Ukraine and for all of Europe.